My parents kicked me out when I was 18. Your sister deserves the future, not you. I was sick and homeless. 5 years later, my sister walked into my office, and I said, "We're here to discuss your qualifications." The mahogany desk felt cool beneath my fingertips as I straightened the stack of resumes. Tuesday morning interviews always began at 9 sharp, and punctuality mattered in this industry. My assistant had already prepared the conference room, water glasses perfectly positioned, leather chairs aligned, everything pristine, professional, controlled. Nothing like the cardboard I had slept on 7 years ago. "Your 9 o'clock is here," Amanda's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Natalie Dawson for the senior marketing position." My heart stopped, actually stopped, for what felt like 3 full seconds before slamming back into rhythm. Natalie, my younger sister, here in my building, about to walk into my office. "Send her in," I managed. To my surprise, my voice sounded steady. The door opened. She looked different, older, of course, her blonde hair shorter, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than I used to earn in a month. But her face went completely white when our eyes met. "Olivia." The word came out strangled. "Miss Dawson." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, have a seat. We're here to discuss your qualifications." She didn't move, just stood there staring like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe, in a way, she had. I didn't know you worked here." "I didn't know you were," she swallowed hard. "The listing said the position reports to the Director of Operations. And I'm the Director of Operations at Meridian Digital Solutions." I kept my voice professional, almost bored. "Third highest position in the company. Now, shall we discuss your resume, or would you prefer to stand there all morning?" Natalie sank into the chair, her hands trembling as she placed her portfolio on the desk. Good. She should be nervous. She should feel every bit as unstable as I had that night when Dad threw my duffel bag onto the porch. 7 years ago, I'd been 18 and dying. Well, maybe not dying, but it felt that way. The pneumonia had settled deep in my lungs, each breath like swallowing glass. I'd missed 3 weeks of my senior year, fallen behind on college applications, lost my part-time job at the bookstore because I couldn't show up. Mom found me on the bathroom floor one morning, fever at 103, too weak to stand. I still remember the way she looked at me, not with concern, but with something colder. "Calculation, this is going to affect Natalie's opportunities," she'd said to Dad later that evening. I'd heard them through the wall, their voices carrying clearly into my room, where I lay trying to convince my lungs to keep working. "The medical bills are going to drain the college fund. We barely have enough saved for one of them as it is." "Then we make a choice," Dad replied. His voice had that flat, businesslike tone, like he was deciding which car to sell, not which daughter to invest in. "Natalie's grades are better. She's younger. She has more potential. Olivia can figure something else out." I told myself I'd misheard, that my fever was making me paranoid. Parents didn't actually abandon their children, right? Not in real life. Not in suburban Connecticut, where everyone had 2 cars, PTA meetings, and family dinners. Then my 18th birthday arrived, 2 weeks after that conversation. I was still sick, still weak, but well enough to come downstairs for what I assumed would be cake and presents. Instead, I found my belongings packed into garbage bags lined up by the front door. "What's happening?" My voice had sounded so small Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad crossed his arms, his face set in that expression he used when delivering bad news to employees at his accounting firm, clinical, detached. "You're 18 now," he said. "Legally an adult. We fulfilled our parental obligations." "What?" The room tilted. "I don't understand." "We've discussed this situation extensively," Mom added, still studying the floor. "With Natalie starting her college applications and the expenses piling up, we need to make practical decisions. The medical bills from your illness have put us in a difficult financial position." "So, you're what, kicking me out?" My lungs burned. "The fever had barely broken 2 days earlier. We're encouraging you to become independent," Dad corrected. "You're an adult. Adults support themselves." Natalie appeared at the top of the stairs, 17, college-bound, their perfect daughter who got straight A's and never got inconveniently sick. She looked down at me with something that might have been pity. Or maybe relief that she wasn't the one standing there beside garbage bags filled with her entire life. Your sister deserves the future, not you, Mom said quietly. We have to prioritize the child with the best chance of success. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Not you. Not worthy, not enough. They made me leave that night, drove me to a homeless shelter downtown, 20 minutes from our house with its manicured lawn and two-car garage. Dad handed me $300 to get started, as if that somehow made it acceptable. As if cash could erase the fact that they were abandoning their sick daughter because investing in her had become financially inconvenient. The shelter smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. I spent the first week coughing so hard I thought my ribs would crack, each fit leaving me breathless and terrified as I tried to sleep on a cot surrounded by strangers. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose and started having panic attacks every time I tried to close my eyes, jerking awake. Convinced I couldn't breathe, but I survived. I found a job washing dishes at a diner. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, let me pick up extra shifts and didn't ask too many questions about why an 18-year-old was working 70 hours a week. I saved every penny that didn't go toward urgent care visits and antibiotics. Applied to community college. Got financial aid. I took classes at night while working doubles during the day and discovered I had a talent for marketing, for understanding what made people want things, believe things. Maybe growing up in a family that chose one daughter over another had taught me something about desire and worth. After all, I transferred to a state university after 2 years. Graduated with honors while working 3 part-time jobs. And landed an entry-level position at Meridian. I clawed my way up through pure competence and the kind of desperate work ethic that comes from knowing you'll never have a safety net, and now, here sat Natalie, 7 years later, trying to get a job at my company. So, I said, flipping open her resume. I see you graduated from Yale. Impressive. That must have cost quite a bit. Her cheeks flushed. Yes, I was fortunate my parents could support me through college. Fortunate indeed. I scanned the page. Interesting that you only have 2 internships listed. Most candidates for this level of position have significantly more experience. I focused on my studies, she said, her voice shrinking. My GPA was 3.8. GPA means very little in the real world, Miss Dawson. We need results, not theoretical knowledge. I set down the resume. Tell me about your marketing campaigns. What metrics did you improve? What ROI did you generate for your previous employers? She fumbled through her answers. They were adequate but unremarkable. She'd done what thousands of other recent graduates had done, followed instructions. Completed assignments, never really had to fight for anything. What makes you think you're qualified for a senior position? I asked. Most of our senior staff have 5 to 7 years of industry experience minimum. You have less than 1 year. I'm a fast learner, she said quickly, leaning forward. And I have strong educational credentials. I thought Yale would carry some weight. Education opens doors, Miss Dawson. Performance keeps them open. I paused. Can you tell me about a time you failed at something and had to completely rebuild your approach? She blinked. Failed? I don't think I have any major failures to discuss. Of course she didn't. Failure had never been an option. For the golden child who got to keep her bedroom and her college fund, everyone fails eventually, I said. The question is whether you learn from it or collapse under it. Have you ever had to do something truly difficult? Something where you had absolutely no support system and had to figure everything out alone? Natalie's eyes were starting to glisten. She knew exactly where this was going. She wasn't stupid. Olivia, can we please just talk? Like sisters, we're discussing your qualifications for this position, Miss Dawson. That's all. My tone could have frozen water. If you'd like to have a different conversation, you're welcome to leave. She stayed seated, whether from pride or desperation. I couldn't tell. Tell me, I continued. What would you do if you lost everything tomorrow? Your apartment, your savings, your family support. How would you survive? That's not a standard interview question, she whispered. I don't ask standard questions. I want to know how you handle adversity. Real adversity. Not getting a B on an exam. I don't know. I'd figure something out. Would you? I leaned back in my chair. Or would you fall apart? Because this job requires resilience. It requires the ability to work through conditions most people would consider impossible. Late nights, impossible deadlines, clients who treat you like garbage. Can you handle that, when you've never had to handle anything difficult in your entire life? Her hands clenched in her lap. You're being cruel. I'm being practical. The same way our parents were practical when they decided one daughter's future mattered more than the other's. The words came out sharp. They made a business decision. Now I'm making one. Olivia, I'm sorry. I was 17. I didn't know what to say or do. You didn't say anything. You stood at the top of those stairs and watched them throw me out while I was still sick, still recovering, and you said nothing. I stood and walked to the window. Downtown Seattle spread out below us, glass and steel and money. Do you know what that first year was like? Asterisk, I can imagine. No, you can't. I turned back to face her. You can't imagine sleeping in a shelter while coughing up blood. Working shifts so long your feet bled in your shoes. Eating one meal a day because that's all you could afford. Having panic attacks in public restrooms because you were so terrified you wouldn't survive another week. Tears streamed down her face. Olivia, I'm sorry. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Your apology means nothing to me. Do you know what would mean something? If any of you had cared enough to check whether I was alive. 5 years, Natalie. 5 years, and not one phone call. Not one email. Not one attempt to see if I survived being thrown away like garbage. Mom and Dad said it was better to let you make your own way. That contact would just make it harder. Harder for whom? For me or for them? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound, even to my own ears. They didn't want to face what they'd done. It was easier to pretend I didn't exist than to acknowledge they'd abandoned their sick daughter because she'd become financially inconvenient. Natalie covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shaking. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction at her pain, but mostly, I just felt empty. I'd imagined this moment, the confrontation, the reckoning, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt sad. Where are they now? I asked. Mom and Dad. Still in Connecticut, she said with a nod. Same house. And your fancy Yale degree, did it get you everything they promised it would? I'm unemployed, she said quietly. The company I worked for went under. I've been applying everywhere for 3 months. This was my first real interview. That explained it, why she'd applied to a Seattle company. Desperate enough to look across the country, and you didn't tell them you were applying here? Didn't mention you were interviewing with your long-lost sister? I didn't know you'd be here. The listing just said Meridian Digital Solutions. I had no idea she hesitated. That you'd done so well. That I'd survived, you mean? I returned to my desk. Let me tell you what I learned, Natalie. I learned that the people who are supposed to love you will betray you when it's convenient. I learned that nobody's coming to save you, so you'd better save yourself. I learned that family means nothing when money's involved. That's not fair. Not everyone is like that. Maybe not, I said. But our parents were. And you stood by and let it happen. I picked up her resume again. Here's the thing about this position. Asterisk, it's prestigious. Great salary, benefits, room for advancement. Exactly the kind of job someone with your background would need to get back on their feet. Hope flickered across her face, but I'm not going to give it to you, I continued. Not because you're not qualified, though you're not, but because you need to learn what it feels like to be told you're not worth the investment. That someone else deserves the opportunity more. That you should just figure it out on your own. Please, she whispered. I need this job. I have student loans, rent due. I'm 3 weeks away from being evicted. Then I guess you'll figure something out. You're smart, right? Yale graduate. You'll manage. She stood abruptly. You're punishing me for what they did. I'm making a practical business decision. Isn't that what you call it? I met her eyes steadily. You're not the best candidate for this position. You lack experience. You lack resilience. And you lack the kind of hunger this job requires. That's all. You're lying. You're doing this because you hate me. I don't hate you, Natalie. Hate requires caring enough to feel something. The words came out flat. True. You're just someone I used to know who needs a job I'm not going to give her. She grabbed her portfolio. Her hand shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Mom was right about you, she snapped. She said you were always bitter, always playing the victim. I defended you. I told her you were just hurt. But she was right, you're vindictive and cruel. Mom said that? Something twisted in my chest. When I asked about you last year, asked if we should try to find you, she said it was pointless. That you'd just hold on to grudges forever and make everyone miserable. Natalie's voice cracked. Guess she knew you better than I did. The door slammed behind her. I stood there in my beautiful office, with its view of the city and its expensive furniture, and felt absolutely nothing. Amanda buzzed in. How'd the interview go? Should I send in your 10 o'clock? Cancel the rest of my morning appointments, I said. I need some time. I sat back down at my desk. Natalie's resume was still in front of me. Yale, 3.8 GPA, 2 internships, adequate but unremarkable skills. She'd been right about one thing, I'd never planned to hire her. The moment I saw her name on the application list, I'd scheduled her interview just to look her in the eye and reject her. Vindictive, cruel, maybe, but also honest. She really wasn't qualified, and even if she had been, could I have worked with her? Seen her every day in these halls and pretended we were colleagues instead of sisters torn apart by parents who'd valued one daughter over the other? My phone rang. Personal cell, not the office line. Unknown Seattle number. Hello? Olivia, a man's voice said. Unfamiliar. This is Trevor Bishop. I'm calling from Swedish Medical Center. Your father was admitted this morning with a heart attack. Your mother listed you as an emergency contact. The floor dropped out from under me. What? He's stable now, but it was serious. Your mother is requesting that you come to the hospital. I understand you're in Seattle? Yes, how did you get this number? Your mother had it, he said. She said she's been holding on to it in case of emergency. 5 years. 5 years. They'd let me believe they'd completely erased me from their lives, and they'd had my number the whole time. Never called, never checked, just kept it filed away for emergencies. Which room? I heard myself ask. Trevor gave me the details. I wrote them down automatically, my hand moving while my brain struggled to process. Dad had a heart attack. Natalie was unemployed and desperate. The family I'd survived without for 5 years was falling apart, and they wanted me now. Needed me now. I looked at Natalie's resume again, thought about her tears, her desperation, the way she'd said please, like she'd never had to beg for anything before. Amanda appeared at my door. Everything okay? You look pale. Family emergency, I said. I need to take the rest of the day. Can you reschedule everything? Of course. Anything you need? What did I need? Revenge? I'd already had that satisfaction, it had tasted like ashes. Justice? There was no such thing. Just people making choices and living with the consequences. I grabbed my coat and keys, drove to the hospital on autopilot, found the cardiac ward, found Dad's room. Mom sat in a corner chair. She'd aged badly, gray hair, deep lines around her mouth, hands that trembled slightly. She looked up when I entered, and something complicated crossed her face. Shame? Relief? Fear? Olivia. You came. Trevor called. I stayed by the door. How is he? Stable. They're running tests. He'll need surgery, probably a bypass. Her voice was thin. It was sudden. He just collapsed at breakfast. Dad lay in the bed, hooked to machines, looking smaller than I remembered. Vulnerable. Human. Does Natalie know? I asked. Mom nodded. She's on her way. She was. She paused. She was at a job interview. Said it didn't go well. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so awful. Why did you keep my number? The question slipped out before I could stop it. 7 years, you never called, but you kept my number. In case something happened. Mom twisted her hands in her lap. In case we needed to reach you. But not to see if I was alive. Not to apologize. Just in case you needed something from me. That's not fair. Fair. The laugh escaped before I could contain it. You want to talk about fair? You threw me out while I was sick because I became too expensive. You told me Natalie deserved the future and I didn't. And you want to talk about fair? We thought we were doing the right thing. We thought you needed to learn independence. You thought it was easier to erase me than to face what you'd done. Don't rewrite history, Mom. I was there. I heard you and Dad discussing it through the wall. I heard you calculate which daughter was worth more. She flinched. We were scared. The medical bills were enormous. We had so little saved. You thought one daughter mattered more than the other. You chose. And now you want me here because you need me. I walked to the window, unable to look at her. Do you have any idea what that first year was like? What I went through? I can imagine. Everyone keeps saying that. Nobody can imagine. You can't imagine being that alone, that terrified, that convinced you're going to die and nobody will care. I cared, she said quietly. I never stopped caring. Then why didn't you call? Why didn't you check on me even once? Pride. Shame. Fear that you'd reject us. She stood, moved closer, but didn't touch me. We told ourselves you were better off without us, that you'd build a better life if we weren't holding you back. But the truth is, we couldn't face what we'd done. It was easier to pretend we'd made the right choice than to admit we destroyed our family. Dad's monitor beeped steadily, the only sound in the room besides our breathing. Natalie came to my office today. I said. Applied for a job. I interviewed her. Did you? Did you hire her? No. I rejected her. Told her she wasn't qualified. Let her walk out feeling exactly as worthless as I did when you threw me out. Mom made a small sound, pain or understanding. Hard to tell, and you know what? It didn't make me feel better. It didn't fix anything. It just made me feel empty. I turned to face her. I wanted revenge so badly. For 7 years, I built my career partly just to prove you wrong. To prove I was worth investing in, that I deserved the future, too. You did prove it, she said softly. Look at you. Look at what you've become. I became this because I had to. Because you gave me no choice. The words came out raw. But I also became this despite you. In spite of you. And I don't know if I should thank you for giving me that fire, or hate you for making me need it. The door opened. Natalie appeared, red-eyed and still wearing her interview suit. She froze when she saw me. You're here, she said. Trevor called. We stood there, 3 generations of damage and dysfunction in a hospital room, while Dad slept. Machines beeped, and everything that mattered suddenly seemed both urgent and pointless. I'm sorry, Mom said again. I'm so sorry for all of it. I was wrong. We were wrong. I chose the easy path instead of the right one, and I destroyed our family because of it. Sorry doesn't fix 7 years, I said. But the anger had leaked out of me somewhere between the office and the hospital. All that was left was exhaustion, sadness, and the strange sensation of standing in a room with people who should have been family but felt like strangers. Natalie wiped her eyes. He asked about you this morning, before it happened. He asked if we'd heard from you, if we knew where you were, and you said. I said no, she admitted. I told him we should have looked for you years ago, that we'd made a terrible mistake. She took a shaky breath. He started crying. I've never seen Dad cry. He said he knew we'd done something unforgivable, that he thought about it every day, and then he just collapsed. Guilt wasn't productive. I'd learned that the hard way. But it crept in anyway, uninvited. This isn't your fault, I told Natalie. Don't let yourself think that. Isn't it? She said softly. All of ours. She looked at Mom. We broke something, all of us. And I don't know if it can be fixed. The question hung there. Could it be fixed? Should it be? I thought about the last 7 years, the shelter, the panic attacks, the grinding poverty. The slow climb out of darkness. The person I'd become, harder, sharper, more capable, but also more guarded, more alone. I thought about revenge and how hollow it had felt. I thought about Dad lying in that bed, maybe dying. And how complicated grief could be when you'd spent 7 years being angry at someone. I don't know if it can be fixed either, I said, but I know that holding on to hate is just another kind of prison. I got out of one prison, I don't need to build another one inside my head. Does that mean you forgive us? Mom asked, hope creeping into her voice. No. I don't forgive you. What you did was unforgivable. The words came out firm but not cruel, just honest. But maybe I can stop letting it define me. Maybe we can figure out some kind of relationship that acknowledges what happened without pretending it didn't. I'd like that, Natalie said quietly. If you're willing to try. I don't know what I'm willing to do yet. This is too much to process right now. I looked at Dad's still form. Is he going to be okay? They think so. If the surgery goes well, Mom said, her voice trembling. Will you stay? At least until we know more? I should have said no. Should have walked out and let them handle their own crisis the way they'd left me to handle mine. That would have been fair. Balanced. But I stayed, sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair and waited while doctors came and went, and machines beeped their steady rhythms. Made awkward small talk with Natalie about nothing important. Accepted terrible coffee from Mom. Pretended we were a normal family having a normal crisis instead of 3 fractured people trying to figure out if broken things could ever be whole again. Dad woke up around 3. Groggy from medication, confused about where he was. His eyes found mine and widened. Olivia. Hey, Dad. You're here. His voice cracked. I thought I was dreaming. Trevor called. Said you'd had a heart attack. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for what we did to you. Don't talk, Mom said gently. You need to rest. But he kept crying, these terrible, broken sounds, and I found myself moving closer to the bed, taking his hand. It felt strange and familiar all at once. You survived, he whispered. You're okay. I survived, I agreed. I'm okay. I'm proud of you, he said softly. So proud. I don't deserve to say that, but I am. Rest now, I said. We can talk later. He squeezed my hand and fell back asleep, still holding on. Natalie found me in the hallway an hour later. I was staring out the window at the parking lot, trying to sort through emotions that didn't fit into any easy categories. I need to tell you something, she said. About the job. You don't have to. Please let me say this. She took a breath. You were right. I'm not qualified. I got that job at my previous company because of Dad's connections. I didn't earn it. When the company went under, I realized I had no real skills, no real experience. I've been coasting on privilege my whole life, Olivia. And I knew what they did to you was wrong. I knew it then, and I know it now. But I benefited from it, so I stayed quiet. I let you suffer so I could have everything. Her voice broke. That makes me complicit. It makes me just as guilty. You were 17, old enough to know better. Old enough to speak up. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes. I don't expect you to hire me. I don't expect anything from you. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. And I'm going to figure out how to be better, how to earn things instead of having them handed to me. How will you start? I'm moving back to Connecticut. Going to live with Mom and Dad, help them through Dad's recovery. Get a regular job, entry level, something I can actually do. Build real skills. She smiled weakly. Maybe follow your example. Something loosened in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of something like respect. The position you applied for is too senior for you, I said. But we have an entry-level marketing coordinator opening. Pays a lot less, much less glamorous. You'd be doing grunt work for at least a year. Her eyes widened. Are you offering me a job? I'm saying if you want to apply, I'll make sure your resume gets a fair review. No nepotism, no special treatment. If you're actually qualified for the coordinator position, you'll be considered along with other candidates. But you'd have to move to Seattle. Start at the bottom. Work your way up the right way. Why? Would you do that? Because despite everything, you're trying to be better. That matters. I shrugged. And because maybe I'm tired of being angry. Maybe I want to see if we can build something new instead of just mourning what we lost. Natalie hugged me. I didn't hug back immediately, still too uncertain, too guarded. But eventually, my arms came up. Tentative. Careful, thank you, she whispered, don't thank me yet. The interview process is brutal, and I won't be the one conducting it. If you can't handle the pressure, you'll wash out in the first round. I understand. And Olivia, she hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you became who you are. Even if we were terrible to you, I'm glad you made it through. We stood in the hospital hallway, too. Sisters trying to find their way back to something that might eventually resemble family. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard conversations and old wounds reopening in moments when the past felt too heavy to carry. But maybe that was okay. Maybe healing didn't mean forgetting or forgiving. Maybe it just meant choosing to stop letting the past dictate every future choice. Dad had surgery the next week. Came through it well. Began a long recovery process with Mom hovering and Natalie coordinating cared. I visited twice. Kept the conversations light. Didn't push for more than any of us could handle. Natalie applied for the coordinator position. Made it through 3 rounds of interviews. Got rejected in the 4th round, legitimately not quite right for the role, but she handled it with grace. Asked for feedback, applied for a different position a month later. Eventually got hired as a junior marketing associate. Moved to Seattle. Started building a real career on real merit. We met for coffee sometimes, awkward at first. Our conversation stayed safely on work, weather, and nothing important. But gradually, carefully, we started talking about real things. About what happened. About who we'd become because of it. About whether family could be rebuilt from broken pieces. Mom and Dad called occasionally. I answered sometimes. Let them tell me about Dad's recovery, Mom's garden, the house that felt too big now. I kept boundaries firm but didn't cut them off completely. Forgiveness still felt impossible, but connection seemed manageable. In small doses, the revenge I'd imagined for 5 years turned out to be nothing like the reality. Rejecting Natalie hadn't felt triumphant. Watching my father cry hadn't felt satisfying. The power I'd craved, the ability to make them hurt the way they'd hurt me, hadn't healed anything. What helped, slowly, was building something new. Not forgetting what happened. Not pretending everything was fine. But choosing to move forward anyway. Choosing to be more than just the person they'd thrown away. I still had hard days, moments when the anger surged back, when I remembered sleeping in that shelter and wanted to burn every bridge. Therapy helped. Time helped. Success helped, though not in the way I'd expected. One evening, almost 6 months after Dad's heart attack, Natalie and I sat in my apartment sharing takeout. She'd just gotten her first real client win at work, landed a campaign that would actually impact the company's bottom line. She was glowing with accomplishment. I get it now, she said suddenly. What you meant about earning things. This feels completely different than anything I've done before. I actually did this. Me. Not because of connections or luck or privilege. Just because I worked hard and learned the skills. Feels good, doesn't it? Feels amazing. She paused, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. Is this what it was always like for you? Everything you accomplished, you had to fight for it. Every single thing, I confirmed. Still do. Probably always will. I'm sorry you had to do it alone. I'm sorry we weren't there. I know. And I did. I believed her remorse was genuine. But belief didn't erase what had happened. I survived it. And, weirdly, it made me stronger. Not that I'd recommend the method. She laughed, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. Do you think you'll ever really forgive them? She asked eventually. Mom and Dad? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe partial forgiveness. Maybe just acceptance, that it happened and I can't change it. I shrugged. But I'm okay with that. I don't need closure or perfect resolution. I just need to keep moving forward. That's probably healthier than I deserve, she said quietly. Healthier than any of us deserve. Probably. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, because holding on to that much anger was killing me in a different way than the pneumonia did. And I refused to let what they did destroy the life I built. We finished dinner. She left. I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about revenge and justice and the complicated space between forgiveness and freedom. The truth was that 5 years ago, my parents had made a choice that shattered our family. They decided I was disposable, that my sister's future mattered more than mine, that love was conditional on financial convenience. That choice had consequences, real ones, painful ones, but it also had unexpected outcomes. It forced me to become someone I might never have been otherwise. Someone strong. Someone capable. Someone who knew exactly what she was worth because she'd had to prove it every single day. Would I choose this path if I could do it over? Never. The pain had been too real, the trauma too deep. But since I couldn't change the past, could I find meaning in what I'd survived? Could I use the strength I'd built out of necessity to create something better than revenge? The answer was yes. Not because I was noble, forgiving, or particularly enlightened, but because I was practical. Because revenge was just another form of being controlled by what they'd done to me. And I'd spent too long being controlled by others. So, I chose freedom instead. Freedom to build my own life on my own terms. Freedom to decide what family meant to me now. Freedom to succeed, not because I was proving them wrong, but because I genuinely loved what I built. 3 months later, I got promoted to Senior Director of Strategic Operations, the second youngest senior director in company history. The announcement went out company-wide, complete with my photo and bio. Natalie sent me a text, "Congratulations. You earned this 1,000 times over." Mom called that evening, her voice thick with emotion. We saw the announcement. Your father wanted me to tell you how proud he is. How proud we both are. Thank you, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Olivia, I know we don't have the right to ask anything of you, but would you consider coming to Connecticut for Thanksgiving? Nothing big, just the 4 of us. A chance to be together. I almost said no automatically, the reflex was strong, but I paused, considered it. Thought about what I actually wanted versus what old pain told me I should want. I'll think about it, I said finally. No promises. That's more than we deserve. Thank you for considering it. After we hung up, I sat with a question. Did I want to sit around a table with the people who'd thrown me out? Did I want to pretend we were a normal family with normal problems? The answer surprised me. Maybe I did, not to pretend nothing happened. Not to absolve them. But to see if we could build something honest, something that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. I called Natalie. If I come to Thanksgiving, will you be there? I was planning on it. Why? Because I need someone there who understands. Someone who won't let them sweep everything under the rug. I can do that, she said. We can be honest together. Hold them accountable while still trying to move forward. Okay. Then I'll come. But I'm staying in a hotel, and if it gets too hard, I'm leaving. No guilt trips. Deal. Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray. I flew into Hartford, rented a car. Checked into my hotel. The house looked exactly the same when I pulled up, same blue shutters, same maple tree in the front yard. Same porch where Dad had thrown my bag 7.5 years ago. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I sat there for 10 minutes, breathing, reminding myself I could leave whenever I wanted. This was my choice. I had the power now. Natalie opened the door before I could knock. You came. I came. Mom appeared behind her, older, frilier, smaller than my memories. Olivia, come in, please. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing, normal holiday smells, but nothing about this felt normal. Dad sat in the living room, still recovering, moving carefully. He stood when he saw me. We stared at each other across the room. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice cracking. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either. We sat down to dinner. Awkward small talk about the weather and work. Nothing that mattered. Finally, I put down my fork. We need to talk about it, I said. All of us. No more pretending. Mom's hand trembled. What do you want us to say? I want honesty. I want you to tell me why. Really, why? Not the sanitized version about teaching me independence. The real reason you chose to throw away your daughter. Silence stretched. Dad looked down at his plate. Mom twisted her napkin in her hands. Natalie watched us all with careful eyes. We were scared, Dad said finally. Terrified. The medical bills were enormous. We'd taken out a second mortgage the year before to cover some bad investments. We had maybe $40,000 saved for college. Between the two of you, it wasn't enough. So, you chose her over me. We chose wrong, Mom said softly. We thought we were making a practical decision, but we were really just taking the coward's way out. It was easier to sacrifice one daughter than to admit we'd failed as providers, failed as parents. You destroyed me, I said. The words came out steady but sharp. You took an 18-year-old kid who was sick and scared and threw her away. Do you understand what that did to me? No, Dad said. We can't understand. We can apologize endlessly, but we can't undo it. We made a choice that broke our family, and we have to live with that. I almost didn't make it, I told them. That first winter, I got so sick again, so weak. I remember lying on that shelter cot, thinking it would be easier to just give up. To stop fighting. Mom made a broken sound. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't give up. You want to know why? Because I refused to let your choice kill me. I refused to prove you right, that I wasn't worth investing in. So I survived out of pure spite. I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to me. Spite became determination. Determination became success. And now here I am, doing better than I ever would have if you'd kept me. Does that make what we did acceptable? Natalie asked quietly. No, I said. It makes it survivable. There's a difference. I looked at each of them. I'm here because I'm trying to figure out if we can have any kind of relationship. Not the family we were, that's gone. But maybe something new. Something honest. What would that look like? Mom asked. I don't know yet. But it starts with you owning what you did. No excuses. No justifications. You made a terrible choice. You prioritized one daughter over another. You threw away your child when she needed you most. Own it. We own it, Dad said completely. We were wrong. We were cruel. We were cowards. And I need you to understand that forgiveness isn't automatic. Maybe it never comes. But I'm willing to try building something new, if you can accept that the past doesn't disappear just because we're sitting at a table together. We accept that, Mom said. Whatever terms you need, whatever boundaries. We're grateful you're even here. The rest of dinner was quieter, more genuine. We talked about real things: Dad's recovery, Mom's volunteer work, Natalie's struggles learning her job, my promotion. Not a perfect family reunion, but an honest one. As I was leaving, Dad caught my arm. Your mother and I revised our wills. Everything is split equally now. Natalie knows. We should have done it years ago. I don't want your money, I said automatically. I know. But it's the only tangible way we can show you that we see our mistake, that you matter equally, that you always should have. I nodded, not sure what to say. Driving back to the hotel, I felt strange. Not healed, healing would take much longer, but lighter somehow. Like I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying for years. Natalie texted around midnight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being brave enough to try. I texted back, thank you for not making excuses for them, for holding them accountable. We're in this together now, whatever this becomes. 6 months later, I accepted a position as Chief Marketing Officer at a startup in Boston. Closer to Connecticut, though I didn't admit that was part of the reason. Natalie had proven herself in Seattle and transferred to our Boston satellite office. We started having regular dinners, sister time that was complicated and awkward, but also real. Mom and Dad visited once. Stayed in a hotel. Respected boundaries. We had brunch. They asked about my life, and actually listened to the answers. Dad told me about his physical therapy. Mom showed me photos of her garden. Normal family stuff, almost. They weren't grandparents, and I wasn't really their daughter anymore, not in any traditional sense. But maybe we were becoming something else. Something that acknowledged damage without being defined by it. The revenge fantasy I'd nurtured for years, the dramatic confrontation. The absolute rejection, the satisfaction of making them suffer, had turned out to be hollow. Real life was messy, more complicated, full of people who'd done terrible things but were still human, still capable of regret. Even if regret couldn't undo harm, I wasn't the same person they'd thrown out. That frightened 18-year-old was gone, transformed by necessity into someone harder, more capable. They weren't the same people either. Crisis and consequence had changed them, made them face what they'd done. Could you rebuild a family from ashes? I didn't know. But you could build something new in the ruins, something honest and clear-eyed about its own fragility. On the anniversary of the day they'd kicked me out, I took myself to a nice dinner. Raised a glass to that terrified girl who'd survived impossible odds. Thanked her for being stubborn enough to keep fighting. Promised her that everything she'd endured had meaning, had value. Had transformed into something worthwhile. Then I went home to my beautiful apartment. To my successful life, and felt genuinely grateful. Not grateful for what they'd done, never that. But grateful for who I'd become in spite of it. Grateful that I'd learned my own worth when no one else would validate it. Grateful that I'd built a life no one could take away, because it was entirely, completely mine. The past couldn't be changed. The damage couldn't be erased. But it could be survived, and survival, I'd learned, was its own form of victory. Not the dramatic revenge I'd imagined, but something quieter and more permanent, the victory of still being here, still standing, still building. Still worth everything I'd once been told I wasn't, and that, ultimately, was enough.